A single mother, left with nothing but a rusty key and a $5 bill, was about to discover her grandmother's final secret. What she found in that forgotten cellar wasn't just about money. It was about a promise that could save her or break her. If you've ever felt like you were starting over with nothing, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button because this story is for you. The air in the lawyer's office was the color of old money, a pale, sterile green that smelled faintly of paper and lemon-scented polish. It was the kind of clean that feels more like an absence of life than a presence of hygiene. I sat on a leather chair that was too deep and too soft, a piece of furniture designed to make you feel small and slightly swallowed. My son, Leo, who was just shy of 2, was asleep in his stroller beside me, his small chest rising and falling in the silent, heavy room. He was the only thing in that entire building that felt real. Across a vast expanse of polished mahogany sat Mr. Davies. He was a man built of straight lines and sharp angles, from his perfectly parted gray hair to the crisp crease in his trousers. He hadn't smiled once. He'd offered me a water I didn't take, and had spoken in a low, even tone that was meant to be soothing, but instead felt like a sedative. I was 21 years old. 21 years, 1 week, and 4 days to be exact. The age of legal adulthood, the age of freedom. For me, it was the age my grandmother's will could finally be read. The will of the only parent I had ever known. Mr. Davies cleared his throat, a dry rustle of paper. So, to summarize, Ms. Vance, your grandmother, June Vance, passed away just over 2 years ago. As you were not of legal age and had no other guardian, her estate was placed in probate, managed by my firm, pending your 21st birthday. He adjusted his glasses, looking at a document. I already knew all this. I had spent 2 years in a state-sponsored transitional living program, a place with cinder-block walls and a curfew, waiting for this day. 2 years of counting down the weeks, then the days, then the hours. 2 years of telling myself that whatever my grandmother had left me would be the start of something new for me and Leo. A real start, not just another temporary room in another temporary building. The estate, he continued, his voice flat, consists of a single asset, a property, Lot 7, Ridge Road in Havenwood County. It's a rural property. House, small barn, approximately 3 acres of land. He paused, and for the first time, a flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. Pity? Discomfort? There are, however, significant liabilities. The property has 2 years of back taxes owing, totaling $9,412. There is also a lien against it from a local creditor for unpaid services in the amount of $2,100. My breath caught in my throat. I had been imagining a small nest egg, a few $1,000s maybe, enough to get a real apartment, to buy Leo a proper bed instead of the pack-and-play he'd already outgrown. The numbers he was quoting were like a wall I couldn't see the top of. So, I owe money? I asked, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. Technically, the estate owes the money, he corrected gently. Should you choose to accept the inheritance, you accept the debt along with it. The total liability is $11,512. He let that number hang in the air. To him, it was probably a rounding error. To me, it was a mountain. He slid a folder across the desk. However, there is a standing offer. A development company, Stonebridge Holdings, has been interested in that parcel and the surrounding ones for some time. They have made a formal offer to purchase the property as is for $12,000. He looked at me over the top of his glasses. My professional advice, Ms. Vance, is to accept the offer. It will clear all the debts associated with the estate. After my firm's administrative fees for managing the probate process are deducted, you would be left with a net inheritance of approximately $5. He said it without a trace of irony. $5. I felt a laugh bubble up in my chest, a hysterical, broken sound. I bit my lip to keep it from escaping. 2 years of waiting, 2 years of dreaming, for $5. He saw the look on my face and his expression softened, just a fraction. It's not what you were hoping for, I know, but it's a clean break. No debt. You walk away free and clear. Free and clear. I was already drowning, and he was offering me a single drop of water. I stared at the folder, at the crisp logo of Stonebridge Holdings. Then I looked at my sleeping son, his dark curls plastered to his forehead. He deserved more than a clean break that left us exactly where we started. He deserved a home. And what did she leave me? I asked, my voice quiet. I just explained, Ms. Vance. The property, with its attendant— No, I interrupted. My grandmother. What did she leave me? A flicker of confusion. He reached into a smaller envelope on his desk. Ah, there were 2 personal items held in trust. He pulled out a small, tarnished brass key on a simple metal ring. It was heavy, old-fashioned. The key to the house, he said. Then he slid a single, crisp $5 bill across the desk. It lay there, green and mocking. And this. I stared at it. The $5. It wasn't a net calculation. It was a specific object she had left for me. My grandmother had a sense of humor, a dry, sometimes painful wit. This felt like one of her jokes from beyond the grave. I laughed then. A short, bitter puff of air. $5, I said, shaking my head. The lawyer just watched me, his face a mask of professional neutrality. Is there anything else? I asked, my hope finally draining away, leaving a cold, hollow feeling in my chest. Just this. He pushed a small, sealed envelope toward me. My name was written on the front in my grandmother's familiar spidery cursive. Elara. Seeing her handwriting was like a punch to the gut. I hadn't seen it in 2 years. I picked it up. It was thin, just a single folded page inside. I didn't open it. Not there. Not in front of him. I scooped up the $5 bill and the key, my fingers closing around the cold metal. Thank you for your time, Mr. Davies. I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. I clicked the brake off Leo's stroller and turned to leave the silent, green room. Ms. Vance, he called after me. I stopped at the door. The offer from Stonebridge is only on the table for 30 days. After that, the county will likely move to seize the property for the unpaid taxes. You'll be left with nothing, not even the $5. He said it like a fact, not a threat. Just the system, working as intended. I understand, I said, and walked out, the heavy door clicking shut behind me, sealing me back into my own world, with a key, a $5 bill, and a ghost in an envelope. The apartment the state had found for me was on the 3rd floor of a crumbling brick building that always smelled of damp laundry and boiled cabbage. It was 1 room, a kitchenette, and a bathroom with a cracked linoleum floor. It was a roof over our heads, and I was grateful for it, but it had never felt like a home. It was a waiting room. That afternoon, the waiting was finally over, and the silence in the small space felt louder than ever. Leo was awake now, playing on a blanket on the floor with a set of brightly colored plastic rings, completely unaware of the crushing weight of our future. I sat on the edge of my bed, the mattress sagging under me, and held the 3 pieces of my inheritance in my hand. The key was ornate, the kind of thing you see in old movies, its teeth worn smooth with use. The $5 bill was crisp, as if it had been saved for a long time. And then there was the letter. My hands trembled as I carefully tore open the seal. The paper inside was thin, almost translucent. The note was short, just a few lines in that familiar hand. "My dearest Elara," it read, "don't sell. Not to them. The real inheritance isn't on paper. It's under the house. Trust the cold. All my love, Grandma June." I read it once, twice, 3 times. Goosebumps rose on my arms, despite the stuffy air in the room. Don't sell. Not to them. Them. Stonebridge Holdings. Why? What did she know? And what did she mean, under the house? We'd had a small root cellar, I remembered that. A dark, musty space where she kept jars of preserves and potatoes in the winter. I remembered being scared of it as a child, of the spiders and the deep, earthy smell. Trust the cold. It was a strange phrase, a riddle. I looked at the $5 in my hand, then at the key. My grandmother wasn't a fool. She was the most practical, resourceful person I'd ever known. She could make a meal out of almost nothing, fix a leaky pipe with tape and a prayer, and face down any problem with a quiet, stubborn resolve. Leaving me $5 and a cryptic note wasn't a joke. It was a message, a map. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark, listening to the hum of the old refrigerator and the distant wail of a siren. I held Leo a little tighter, his warm body a small anchor in a sea of uncertainty. Mr. Davies' voice echoed in my head. A clean break, no debt. It was the sensible choice, the adult choice. Take the offer, get the tiny bit of cash, and use it to find another room in another building, and keep surviving. But my grandmother's words echoed louder. Don't sell. It was a command, a plea. She had a reason. She had a plan. She had always had a plan. I thought about the house. I hadn't been back since I was 14, when social services had first stepped in after she got sick. My memories of it were a child's memories, hazy and sun-drenched. The smell of baking bread, the feel of the worn wooden floorboards under my bare feet, the way the light came through the kitchen window in the late afternoon. It was the only real home I'd ever had. Could I let it go for $5? Could I ignore her last words to me? By morning, the decision had settled in my bones. It wasn't even a decision, really. It was a certainty. I had to go. I had to see it for myself. I had to find out what she meant. I took out my meager savings, the cash I'd painstakingly squirreled away from my part-time job at a diner. It wasn't much, a few $100s. I used my phone to look up bus schedules. Havenwood County was a 6-hour ride away, a journey into a past I had tried hard to forget. I packed a diaper bag for Leo and a small backpack for myself. Clothes for a couple of days, the last of our food, the key, the $5 bill, and the note. I called Mr. Davies. He answered on the second ring, his voice as crisp as ever. "Mr. Davies, it's Elara Vance." "Ms. Vance, have you made a decision regarding the offer?" "I'm not selling," I said, the words feeling solid and real as I spoke them. "Not yet. I'm going to the house." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him mentally shaking his head. "Ms. Vance, Elara, I have to advise you against that. The property is not in a habitable condition. The utilities are shut off. It's not a safe place for you, let alone a small child. I'm just going to look at it, I said, my voice firm. I have to. Another pause. Very well, he said finally, his tone resigned. The key you have should open the front door. The property is your responsibility now. Be careful. I hung up before he could say anything else. I looked at Leo, who was watching me with wide, curious eyes. We're going on an adventure, I told him, trying to smile. We're going to see Grandma's house. He clapped his hands and gave me a gummy, joyous smile. He had no idea what was at stake, but I did. I was betting everything we had, all $247 of it, on a ghost's riddle and the memory of a woman who had never, ever let me down. The bus ride was a long, rumbling journey through a landscape that slowly bled from gray cityscapes into green, rolling hills. Leo, lulled by the motion, slept for most of the way, his head heavy on my lap. I stared out the window, watching the world blur by, my stomach a tight knot of anxiety and a strange, unfamiliar flicker of hope. With every mile that passed, I felt like I was traveling not just through space, but through time, back to a life I thought was gone forever. We arrived in Havenwood just as the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and bruised purple. The town was smaller than I remembered, a single main street with a handful of storefronts, a diner, a hardware store, a post office. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles deep in your bones. The bus station was just a covered bench on the side of the road. There were no taxis. I had known this, had looked it up. Ridge Road was another 3 miles out. 3 miles I would have to walk. I settled Leo into his stroller, checked the straps, and began to push him along the cracked pavement of the shoulder. The air was different here. It smelled of damp earth, of pine needles, and of the coming rain. It was the smell of my childhood. Cars passed occasionally, their headlights cutting through the growing dusk. One slowed down, an old pickup truck, and a man with a weathered face and a kind smile leaned out the passenger window. "Need a lift, miss? It's a fair walk to anywhere from here." I hesitated for a moment. My grandmother's voice was in my head, warning me about strangers. But my arms were already aching, and Leo was starting to get fussy. "I'm just going up to the old Vance place on Ridge Road," I said. The man's eyes widened slightly in recognition. "June's place? Lord, haven't seen anyone head up that way in years. Hop in the back. We'll get you there." I thanked him, folded the stroller, and climbed into the bed of the truck with Leo on my lap. The ride was bumpy, the wind whipping my hair across my face, but it was faster than walking. The driver and his friend didn't ask any more questions. They just drove. They dropped me at the end of a long, unpaved driveway. 2 stone pillars, one of them leaning precariously, marked the entrance. The name Vance was barely visible on a rotted wooden sign hanging from one of them. "This is it," the driver said, his voice soft. "You be careful now. That house has been empty a long time." I thanked them again, and they drove off, their red taillights disappearing into the twilight, leaving me and Leo in an almost absolute silence, broken only by the chirping of crickets. The driveway was overgrown with weeds that grabbed at my ankles as I walked. And then I saw it, the house. It was worse than I had imagined. The paint was peeling in long, curling strips, revealing the weathered gray wood beneath. The porch sagged dramatically on one side, and several windows were boarded up. It looked hunched and tired, like an old man sinking into the earth. For a moment, my heart sank. Mr. Davies was right. This was a ruin. What was I doing here? Then I looked closer. I saw the climbing rose bush my grandmother had planted, still stubbornly producing a few deep red blossoms, tangled but alive. I saw the wind chimes, rusted and silent, still hanging by the door. I saw the bones of the place, the bones of my home. I pushed the stroller up the creaking, groaning steps of the porch. I stood before the front door, its deep blue paint now faded to a chalky gray. I took a deep breath and slid the old brass key into the lock. It resisted at first, stiff from disuse. I jiggled it, pushed, and then, with a loud grating click, the lock turned. The door swung inward on a single protesting groan, opening into darkness. The air that rolled out was thick with the smell of dust, of trapped time, of mice and memories. I clicked on the small flashlight on my phone, its beam cutting a nervous path through the gloom. I stepped inside, pulling the stroller in after me. I was home. The inside was a landscape of decay. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, and cobwebs draped from the corners of the ceiling like funeral shrouds. In the living room, the furniture was still there, huddled under white sheets like a family of ghosts. I pulled one off a lumpy armchair, the dust motes dancing in my flashlight beam. I could almost see my grandmother sitting there, a book in her lap, her reading glasses perched on her nose. I walked through the small house, room by room. My old bedroom, the wallpaper with its faded yellow flowers peeling at the seams. The kitchen, where a calendar on the wall was still turned to August, 2 years ago. Each room was a fresh wave of grief, a reminder of everything I had lost. But it wasn't just grief. There was something else, too, a sense of belonging. The floorboards still creaked in the same familiar places. The layout of the house was etched into my muscle memory. This place knew me. I made a small camp for us in the living room. I laid out Leo's blanket and gave him his bottle. There was no power, no water, but for one night we would be okay. Once he was asleep, his breath soft in the quiet house, I turned my attention to my grandmother's note. It's under the house, trust the cold. The cellar. The door was in the kitchen, set flat into the floor, a heavy wooden slab with a thick iron ring for a handle. I remembered it well. It had always been locked. My grandmother kept the key on a high hook, far from my curious child's hands. I knelt and pulled on the iron ring. It didn't budge. It was padlocked, a heavy, industrial-looking padlock, rusted and formidable. The brass key from the lawyer's office was too delicate, too ornate for this beast. I tried it anyway, knowing it was useless. It didn't even fit into the keyhole. Frustration pricked at me. Of course, it wouldn't be that easy. My grandmother was never that straightforward. I sat back on my heels, the flashlight beam playing over the weathered wood of the cellar door. Where would she hide a key? It had to be somewhere I would know, somewhere that was part of our life together. I thought back. I searched my memories for every detail of this kitchen. The cookie jar, shaped like a smiling pig, the rack of spices, the loose floorboard under the sink where she once hid my birthday present. I checked the floorboard. Nothing but dust and a dead spider. I ran my hands along the mantelpiece above the cold fireplace. I checked inside the old cookie jar. Nothing. I was starting to feel a familiar despair creep in. Maybe this was all a wild goose chase. Maybe I had dragged my son all the way out here for nothing. I was cold, tired, and scared. I sat down at the dusty kitchen table and put my head in my hands. The flashlight cast a long, lonely circle of light on the floor. My eyes traced the patterns in the old linoleum and then drifted to the hearth. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall of the kitchen. It was the heart of the house in winter. My grandmother had built the fire every single morning. I remembered sitting in front of it, mesmerized by the flames. I remembered her telling me stories. And I remembered her pointing to one particular brick, one that was darker than the others. "That's the hearthstone, Elara," she'd said. "It holds the warmth even after the fire is gone. It's the heart of the heart." I got up and walked over to the fireplace. I ran my fingers over the cold, rough stones. I found the dark brick she had pointed out all those years ago. It looked solid, just like all the others. But as my fingers traced its edges, I felt it. A slight give, a looseness that the others didn't have. My heart started to pound. Using my fingernails, I carefully worked at the mortar around it. It was old and crumbled easily. After a few minutes of scraping, the brick shifted. I pulled it out. Behind it was a small, dark cavity, and inside that cavity, nestled in a small oilskin pouch, was a key. It was thick, heavy, and made of dark iron. It was ugly and practical. It looked like it could open a dungeon. I took the key back to the cellar door. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely fit it into the padlock. It slid in with a satisfying clunk. I turned it. The rust fought back, grinding and groaning. But with a final, shuddering snap, the lock sprang open. I pulled it off. My breath held tight in my chest. I lifted the heavy iron ring and pulled. The cellar door was heavier than I remembered. It lifted with a deep groan of protesting wood, releasing a blast of cold, damp air that smelled of earth, stone, and something else. Something like time itself. The smell of the cold. Trust the cold. I shone my light down into the darkness. A set of steep stone steps led down into blackness. I took a deep breath, my fear warring with a desperate, burning curiosity. I had found the way in. Now I had to have the courage to go down. The next morning, I called Mr. Davies. I had to walk half a mile down the road to get a signal, leaving Leo sleeping soundly in the house, a chair wedged under the doorknob. It felt wrong to leave him, but I had to make the call. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice betraying a hint of surprise. "I trust you found the property, as I described." "I did," I said, my voice steady. "I'm at the house. I found a way into the cellar. It was locked." There was a pause. "I see. And what did you find in the cellar?" "I haven't gone all the way in yet. I need a witness. I need you to be here." I could hear the sheer absurdity of my request hanging in the air between us. I was a broke, 21-year-old girl in a derelict house, asking a senior partner at a law firm to drive 6 hours into the middle of nowhere, based on a cryptic note. "Ms. Vance, Elara," he began, the professional patience in his voice wearing thin. "My time is... I cannot simply drive out to Havenwood on a whim. If you found something of material value, you should document it, photograph it, and we can discuss it." "It's not about a whim," I said, my voice rising with an urgency I couldn't control. "My grandmother left me a note. She said the real inheritance was down there. She locked it for a reason.
I am not going down there alone, and I am not leaving until I know what this is about. You are the executor of her estate. This is part of your job." The silence on the other end of the line stretched on for an eternity. I was sure he was going to refuse, to tell me I was being foolish and emotional. I was ready for it. But then he sighed, a long, weary sound. "Where are you right now?" "At the house," I repeated. "Okay," he said, and I could hear the clicking of a keyboard in the background. "I have a hearing I cannot miss this afternoon. I can leave the city afterward. I will be in Havenwood late this evening. There is a motel there, the Havenwood Inn. I will stay there and meet you at the property at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Does that work?" Relief washed over me so powerfully my knees felt weak. "Yes, thank you." "Don't thank me yet, Miss Vance," he said, his tone dry. "And please, do not go into that cellar alone. For liability reasons, if nothing else." He hung up. I walked back to the house, the morning sun warming my face. He was coming, a witness, an ally, whether he wanted to be or not. I spent the rest of the day cleaning. It was a futile task, like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon, but it was something to do. I found old rags and a bucket and used the last of the bottled water I'd brought to wipe down the kitchen surfaces. I swept the floor with a worn-out broom I found on the back porch.
I was reclaiming the space, one small act at a time. I was making it ours. That night, with Leo asleep beside me, the house felt less menacing. It felt like it was waiting, just as I was. Mr. Davies arrived at precisely 9 o'clock the next morning. His silver sedan looked comically out of place, parked next to the leaning stone pillar, its polished surface already gathering a fine layer of dust. He got out of the car wearing trousers and a crisp shirt, but he'd swapped his suit jacket for a sensible windbreaker and his shiny dress shoes for a pair of sturdy-looking boots. He looked around at the dilapidated house and the overgrown yard, his expression unreadable. "Miss Vance," he said, his nod formal. "Lead the way." I led him into the kitchen. I had Leo in a baby carrier strapped to my chest, his head resting against my collarbone. Mr. Davies's eyes flickered to the open cellar door, a dark, gaping hole in the floor. "This is it," I said. He knelt, peering into the darkness. He clicked on a powerful, high-beam flashlight that made my phone's light look like a birthday candle. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating the stone steps and the damp, earthen walls below. "Right," he said, his voice all business. "Let's see what June was hiding." He went first, testing each step before putting his full weight on it. I followed close behind, one hand on the damp wall for balance, the other protectively on Leo's back. The air grew colder and colder with each step, the smell of damp earth and stone becoming overwhelming. The cellar was small, no bigger than the kitchen above it. The floor was packed earth, and the walls were rough-hewn stone. Shelves lined one wall, filled with dusty, empty canning jars, their metal lids rusted shut. In the beam of Mr. Davies's flashlight, I could see cobwebs as thick as cotton. It looked exactly like what it was, a forgotten root cellar. "Well," Mr. Davies said, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. He swept his light across the room. "I see jars. I see dirt. I see a notable lack of treasure chests." His tone was dry, but I could hear the underlying note of, "I told you so." My heart sank. He was right. It was empty. I had dragged him all this way for nothing. I had gotten my own hopes up for nothing. I felt tears of frustration and humiliation pricking my eyes. Then I remembered the last line of the note, "Trust the cold." I closed my eyes and tried to focus. The air in the cellar was uniformly damp and cool, but was there a difference? I took a few steps, turning in a slow circle, and then I felt it. A subtle draft, a stream of air that was colder than the rest. It was coming from the far wall, the one behind the empty shelves. "Here," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "It's colder over here." Mr. Davies walked over, his expression skeptical. He ran his hand along the stone wall. "It's a stone wall, Ms. Vance. They tend to be cold." "No, feel it," I insisted. "There's a draft." He humored me, pressing his palm flat against the stones. He moved his hand slowly, and then he stopped. His eyebrows shot up. "You're right," he said, his voice losing its detached edge for the first time. "There's air moving here." He knocked on the stones. Most gave a dull, solid thud, but one, low to the ground, gave a slightly different sound, a hollow echo. Together, we pulled the heavy wooden shelves away from the wall. Behind them, the stonework looked seamless, but where the hollow sound had come from, the mortar was different, darker, softer. Mr. Davies took a crowbar he'd brought from his car, ever prepared, and wedged it into the crack. He grunted with effort, and with a scraping, grinding sound, a section of the stone wall, about 3 feet square, swung inward on hidden hinges. It wasn't a wall, it was a door. Behind it was a dark, cramped space, barely a crawl space. And sitting squarely in the middle of the earthen floor was a large, black, military-style footlocker. Mr. Davies shone his light on it. It was sealed with 2 heavy latches. He didn't say a word. He just looked from the footlocker to me, and in his eyes I saw the skepticism finally, completely evaporate. It was replaced by a look of stunned silence. He reached in and with a grunt dragged the heavy box out into the main part of the cellar. It was surprisingly heavy. We both knelt on the damp earth floor, staring at it. This was it, the real inheritance. My hands were shaking as I reached for the latches. They were stiff, but they weren't locked. I flipped them open. They made a loud snapping sound in the quiet cellar. I took a breath, looked at Mr. Davies, and lifted the lid. The first thing I saw was money, bundles of cash neatly wrapped in paper bands, 50s and 100s. My breath hitched. It wasn't a king's ransom, not millions, but it was more money than I had ever seen in my life. I started pulling the bundles out, my hands trembling. Mr. Davies began to count them, his movements methodical and calm, a stark contrast to my frantic energy. 28, 29, 30,000, he announced finally, his voice low and amazed. $30,000. In cash. $30,000. It was a lifeline. It was a new start. It was enough to pay the debts, fix the house, and live for a year without worrying about rent or food. I started to cry then, silent tears of relief and grief and overwhelming gratitude. My grandmother had done this. She had saved this for me, a little at a time, hiding it away from the world, from the system, so that one day I would have a chance. But the money wasn't all that was in the box. Beneath the cash were other things. The first was a stack of sealed envelopes held together with a rubber band. They were numbered on the front, 1, 2,
3, and so on, up to 7, all in her familiar handwriting. Beneath the letters was a thick, heavy 3-ring binder. It was black, unmarked. It looked official. Mr. Davies picked up the binder. His lawyer's curiosity piqued. I picked up the first letter, the one marked with a 1. "Maybe we should go back upstairs," Mr. Davies suggested, his voice gentle. "It's cold down here." We hauled the footlocker up the stone steps and into the dusty sunlight of the kitchen. We sat at the old wooden table, the box between us like a sacred object. Leo had woken up and was babbling happily in the carrier, reaching for the shiny metal on the box. I carefully opened the first letter. The paper was crisp. Her handwriting was as clear as if she had written it yesterday. "My dearest Ilara," it began. "If you are reading this, it means you were smart enough to find my key and brave enough to face the cellar. I knew you would be. It also means I am gone, and for that I am more sorry than you will ever know. I hope you have my grandbaby with you. Kiss him for me." I had to stop, a sob catching in my throat. Mr. Davies waited patiently, his gaze fixed on the binder in his hands. I took a shaky breath and continued reading. "I need you to understand some things, Ilara. First, the money. I saved every penny of it over 20 years. It's your emergency fund. It's your new beginning. I kept it in cash because I didn't trust the banks, and I didn't trust the state. I knew if anything happened to me, they would count every dollar and use it against you, or absorb it into their system of fees and costs. This money is clean. It's yours. It never officially existed. Use it to pay the vultures what they're owed, the back taxes, the lien. Use it to make this house livable again. But do it carefully. Pay in cash where you can. Don't deposit it all at once. Be smart. Now about the house. I know it looks like I let it fall apart. I know it looks like I left you with a burden of debt. That was on purpose, my dear. I needed the property to look worthless. I needed anyone who came sniffing around to see nothing but a liability, a teardown. It was a kind of camouflage. It was the only way I knew to protect it for you." I looked up from the letter, my mind reeling. The debt was intentional. The decay was a disguise. It wasn't neglect. It was a strategy. A desperate, brilliant strategy. Mr. Davies had opened the binder. He was flipping through the pages, his expression growing more and more grim. The pages were filled with photocopied documents, newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and what looked like legal records. "What is that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He looked up at me, his eyes dark with a new, serious understanding. "Ilara," he said, dropping the Ms. Vance for good. This is meticulous. Your grandmother was building a legal case, a very serious one." He turned the binder around so I could see. The top page was a title deed for our property, dated 50 years ago, in my grandfather's name. Clipped to it was a newspaper article with a headline, "Local farmer dies in tragic accident." My grandfather. He had died before I was born. My grandmother never spoke of it. It was a closed door, a room I knew not to enter. "What does this have to do with anything?" I asked. Mr. Davies took a deep breath. "According to these notes," he said, tapping a page of my grandmother's cursive, "your grandfather's accident happened 2 weeks after he refused to sell this land to a man named Marcus Thorne. Thorne was just starting a development company back then. He wanted this whole ridge. Your grandfather was the last holdout." He flipped a few more pages. "That company he started? It was called Thorne Development. It eventually went public and rebranded. It's now called Stonebridge Holdings." Stonebridge Holdings,
the name from the lawyer's office, the company that wanted to buy my land for just enough to cover the debts my grandmother had intentionally created. It all clicked into place, a horrifying, sickening puzzle. This wasn't a random business transaction. This was the final move in a game that had been playing out for 50 years. My grandmother hadn't just been saving money. She had been gathering armor. She had been waiting for a champion, and she had just handed me the sword. I stared at the $30,000. It was freedom. It was a ticket out. I could take that money, let Mr. Davies accept the offer from Stonebridge, and disappear. I could get a nice apartment in a new city where no one knew my name. I could give Leo a safe, stable, quiet life. No fight, no risk, just a clean break, as Mr. Davies had first advised. It was everything I had thought I wanted. Or I could stay. I could use this money, this house, and this binder full of a dead woman's righteous fury to fight them. I could fight for the memory of a grandfather I'd never met. I could fight for the home my grandmother had died protecting. It was a choice between a safe life and a meaningful one, between running from the past and reclaiming it. I looked at Leo, who had finally fallen asleep against my chest, his little mouth slightly open. What kind of life did I want for him? A life where his mother ran from a fight? Or a life where she stood her ground, no matter how scary it was? I felt a profound internal shift, a settling of tectonic plates in my soul. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach. But underneath it, something else was growing. A hard, defiant kernel of anger. My grandmother's anger. My anger. They had taken my grandfather. They had hounded my grandmother. And now they were coming for me and my son. They thought I was a broke, scared, 21-year-old girl who would jump at the chance for $12,000. They had underestimated me, and they had profoundly, catastrophically underestimated my grandmother. What would you do? Take the money and run, secure in the knowledge that you could finally provide a stable life for your child? Or would you stay and fight for something that's more than just a house, more than just land, but is a legacy of defiance? Sometimes the easiest choice isn't the right one. It's a question of what we owe to those who came before us, and what we owe to those who come after. If you've ever faced a moment like that, a choice that defines who you are, let me know in the comments. I read them all. And if you're invested in what happens next, if you want to see this through to the end, make sure you're subscribed, because this story is far, far from over. Now let's get back to that kitchen table. I looked across at Mr. Davies, who was watching me, his expression cautious, waiting. He saw the conflict in my eyes, the war being waged inside me. He wasn't just a lawyer anymore. He was the first person to know the whole story, the keeper of the secret alongside me. He didn't push. He didn't advise. He just waited. I picked up the second letter from the pile. My hands were steady now. I opened it and read it aloud, my voice clear and strong in the quiet room. Ilara, if you're reading this one, it means you found the binder. It means you know about Thorn. I'm sorry to lay this burden on you. I tried for years to fight him myself, but I was always one step behind. He's a powerful man, connected, with deep pockets. He buries people in legal fees. He pressures them, threatens them in ways you can't prove. After your grandfather died, he thought I would break. He thought a grieving young widow would sell for pennies on the dollar. I didn't. I held on. And I started watching him. I started collecting things. The binder is my life's other work. It's not just about us, Ilara. It's about the other families he pushed out, the land he acquired through intimidation and predatory loans. It's a pattern of behavior. That's what the lawyers I spoke to always said they needed. A pattern. I knew he would come for this land again after I was gone. I knew he'd see your name on a document, see you were young and alone, and think it was finally his chance.
The debt on the house was my final move. It was bait, to draw him out, to make him put an offer on paper, to connect Stonebridge Holdings directly to this property right when you were here to fight back. You have the truth, Ilara, and you have the money to hire help. What you do with it is your choice. I will not blame you if you walk away. I will not. Your safety and the safety of my grandbaby is the most important thing. Take the money and build a good life. I would rest easy knowing you were safe. But if you choose to fight, if you choose to finish what I started, then you will not be fighting for a piece of dirt. You will be fighting for justice, for your grandfather, for all the other families, for our name. The choice is yours. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Grandma June. When I finished reading, there were tears in my eyes again, but they were different tears. They weren't tears of grief. They were tears of fierce, heartbreaking love. She had given me an out. She had blessed my escape if I chose it. But in doing so, she had made it impossible to take. She had shown me the door to a safe life, but she had also shown me the path to an honorable one. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table. I looked at the $30,000. It was no longer an escape fund. It was a war chest. I looked at the binder. It was no longer a collection of old papers. It was a weapon. I took a deep breath and looked at Mr. Davies. The question of what I would do was gone. There was only one path forward. "We're not selling," I said. The words were quiet, but they landed in the silent kitchen with the force of a gavel. "We're going to fight them." A slow smile spread across Mr. Davies' face. It was the first real smile I had seen from him, and it transformed his severe features. He looked, for a moment, like a man who had just been handed the case of a lifetime. "Good," he said, his voice resonating with a new energy. "Because after a cursory look at this binder, I believe your grandmother has given us enough ammunition to bury Stonebridge Holdings for a decade."
He stood up and began to pace the small kitchen, suddenly electric. "This is incredible. She's documented everything. Predatory contract terms, intimidation tactics, environmental violations on their other properties. She's even got sworn affidavits from 2 of their former employees. June Vance wasn't just a grandmother. She was a first-rate private investigator." He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes sharp. "This is going to be a long and ugly fight, Ilara. They will try to discredit you. They will try to paint you as an opportunist. They will use your past, your age, everything against you. Are you ready for that?" I thought of the cinder-block walls of the transitional home. I thought of the dismissive looks from caseworkers. I thought of every person who had ever looked at me and seen a statistic, a problem to be managed. "I've been fighting my whole life," I said. "I'm ready." That conversation was the beginning. The $30,000 became a retainer. Mr. Davies officially became my lawyer, not the estate's. He went back to the city, and the first shot was fired. A blistering letter to Stonebridge Holdings, formally rejecting their offer and informing them of our intent to file a lawsuit for harassment, predatory acquisition tactics, and wrongful death in the case of my grandfather. The response was swift.
A letter from a high-priced law firm denying all claims and condescendingly reminding Mr. Davies of the outstanding debts on the property. Then came the phone calls. They started a week later. They were always from a blocked number. A smooth, calm voice on the other end. "Ms. Vance, this is a mistake. You're in over your head. Ms. Vance, that offer is still on the table. In fact, we'd be willing to increase it to $50,000, a gesture of goodwill. Ms. Vance,
A young mother like you should be thinking about her son's future. This is a dangerous game you're playing." I never said anything. I just listened, my heart pounding, and then hung up. I told Mr. Davies about every single call. He had me start recording them. "This is good," he'd said, his voice grim. "This is witness intimidation. They're arrogant. They're making mistakes." While the legal storm brewed in the background, I focused on the house. I used the cash, as my grandmother instructed, to pay the debts. I walked into the county tax office and paid the $9,412 in cash. The clerk's eyes nearly popped out of her head. I did the same for the lien. The property was finally, truly mine. Then I started the work. I found a local handyman, a grizzled old man named Sal, who had known my grandmother. He gave me a fair price to fix the sagging porch and replace the boarded-up windows. I spent my days pulling weeds, scraping old paint, and cleaning away the years of dust and neglect. Every weed I pulled felt like an act of defiance. Every fresh coat of paint was a victory. I was not just restoring a house, I was reclaiming my history. The community, which had at first been distant, started to warm up. The man who had given me a ride stopped by with a casserole. The waitress at the diner always gave Leo a free cookie. Sal, the handyman, started telling me stories about my grandmother, about her stubbornness and her secret kindness. I learned that she had quietly helped half the town over the years, lending a few dollars here, a bag of vegetables from her garden there. They hadn't forgotten. Slowly, Havenwood started to feel less like a strange place from my past and more like a potential future. Mr. Davies, true to his word, used the binder to connect with the other families my grandmother had researched. He found 2 more who were willing to join our lawsuit. Our case grew stronger. We weren't just one aggrieved family anymore. We were a class action in the making. One afternoon, a sleek black car I didn't recognize pulled up the driveway. A man in an expensive suit got out. He was older, with silver hair and a face that was handsome in a cold, predatory way. I knew instantly who he was. Marcus Thorne. He walked right up to me as I was painting the porch railing, Leo playing in a playpen nearby. "Elara Vance," he said. It wasn't a question. His smile was thin, tight. "You've been busy. The place looks better." "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice cold. I kept my grip tight on the paintbrush. "I think we can help each other," he said smoothly. "My lawyers are idiots. Your lawyer is a bulldog. This has gotten out of hand. I'm here to make you a real offer. No lawyers, just you and me. I'll give you $250,000, cash, for the house, the land, and that ridiculous binder your grandmother put together. You sign an NDA and you disappear. You and your boy can have a very nice life somewhere else. $250,000. It was a life-changing amount of money. A year ago, I would have wept with gratitude for an offer like that. Now, I just felt a cold, clear anger. He thought he could buy me. He thought he could buy my family's story, my grandfather's life, my grandmother's legacy. He was still underestimating me. I looked him dead in the eye. "This house is not for sale," I said. "My story is not for sale, and my grandmother's memory is not for sale. Now get off my property." His smile vanished. His eyes turned to ice. "You're making a terrible mistake, little girl." "No," I said, dipping my brush back in the paint. "You made a terrible mistake 50 years ago, and you've been making it ever since. Now it's time to pay." He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then he turned, got back in his car, and drove away, spitting gravel from his tires. I stood there, my heart hammering against my ribs, but I wasn't scared. I was exhilarated. I had faced the monster, and I hadn't flinched. The legal battle is still ongoing. It will take years, Mr. Davies tells me. These things always do. But the tide has turned. With the recorded phone calls and the new witnesses, the district attorney's office has opened an investigation into Stonebridge's business practices. The local paper has started sniffing around. Thorne's empire is starting to show cracks. It's not the end of the story. It's just the beginning of a new chapter. I live in the house now. It's still a work in progress, but it's warm and it's safe. The wind chimes on the porch make music again. The smell of baking bread fills the kitchen some mornings, my clumsy attempts to replicate my grandmother's recipes. Leo took his first steps on the worn wooden floor of the living room. It's not just a property or an asset. It's a home. It's a fortress. It's a monument to a quiet, stubborn woman who spent her life building a shield to protect her family. My grandmother taught me that an inheritance isn't always something you get, but something you do. It's not a sum of money or a piece of land. It's the story you choose to inhabit, the legacy you choose to carry forward. She left me with more than a house. She left me with a choice. And in making that choice, in choosing to fight, I found something I never knew I was looking for: a sense of purpose, a community, and a deep, unshakable understanding of who I am. I am June Vance's granddaughter, and I am not for sale. This house is more than wood and nails now. It's a testament to a quiet fight, and it's a home for my son. It's the place where we both get our second chance. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you that your own story has power, and that some things are worth fighting for, please subscribe and join our community. These are the stories we share here. Stories of resilience, of finding strength in the broken places. Share your own stories of second chances, of difficult choices, in the comments below. I read every one, and I believe that by sharing them, we help each other rebuild, one story at a time. Thank you for listening.